Leon is someone I always really enjoyed. I love his Carney album. I played it to death back in the 70s. And I also loved Mad Dogs and Englishmen, which of course is Leon Russell with Rita Coolidge, with Joe Cocker. Just an amazing energy from that whole album. Joe Cocker had done Woodstock, got into a big argument with his band, fired them all, went to his parents' house, kicked his heels up, and decided to just hang out. He gets a phone call. You've got to come to LA immediately. You have a tour starting up in 3 weeks. I'm what? So he came out to LA and was told by D. Anthony, his manager at the time, you will be sued. You will be thrown out of the country if you don't fulfill these dates. Well, I don't have a show, he said. I don't have a band. Let's call Leon Russell. Leon came into A&M Studios in LA and said, you want a band? I just stopped touring with Delaney and Bonnie and friends. We had kind of like a communal concert atmosphere. Eric Clapton dropped in. I can call some of the guys and see if I can put together a band. The next thing you know, he whips out his phone book, calls 3 drummers, lines up 3 different drummers for the show. Rita Coolidge was part of putting the choir together. She called all her friends. Claudia Lanier was in the studios at the time doing backups on a Humble Pie album. And the show just came together in days. They had the A&M Studios in Hollywood, which used to be Charlie Chaplin's film studio. So they had these big spaces to have this choir and this huge band. They started recording when they were there, came together, Space Captain and The Letter. They did right there in the studios. They set out on the tour. They got an entire plane to take 35 to 50 people, depending upon what phase of the tour they were on, and opened up in Detroit 2 weeks later. Joe and Leon got along really well together when he was recording his second album. And he did Delta Lady on that album, and that was written by Leon about his girlfriend at the time, Rita Coolidge. And Rita sings background on it, so it was really kind of a communal event. So he admired Leon, loved his songs, thought he was very creative. When Leon put this band together for Mad Dogs and Englishmen right before Joe's very eyes, he was very impressed with Leon. And Leon insisted that he be the master of ceremonies, which was perfect because Joe was not that he didn't have that kind of personality. He got up and sang. So it ended up working out like a rock and roll circus or a vaudeville where everybody had their own spotlight. Claudia Lanier had a song, Rita Coolidge had a song, Leon had a song, and Joe Cocker was the undisputed star of the whole thing and at the center of it. So they got along very well at the beginning of the tour. Now, according to the sources I found, people started going behind Joe's back and going, Joe, don't you think that Leon, is stealing your thunder and really taking over the show? Well, he planted this idea in Joe's head, and I think it started to bother him towards the end of the show. I think that Joe got this idea that Leon was riding his coattails. But Joe went back to his parents' house and laid on the sofa for almost 2 years, depressed, unhappy. He'd only made like a couple $100 from Woodstock. By the time they did all the expenses from Mad Dogs and Englishmen, he wasn't left with a lot of money. But he was a huge rock star. Logically, if he was a business person, he'd go, okay, we've got this basis. Everyone knows who I am. Let's do another tour and capitalize on it. Instead, he got depressed, laid around, and did nothing for over a year. And I think the idea that Leon was an adversary kind of festered in his mind, and it's sort of sad that happened. They really didn't connect after Mad Dogs and Englishmen other than Joe recording a song for you. That was a couple years later, but without Leon. And then they ran into each other at one event, but didn't speak at all. And then in Tulsa, years later, Leon played as the opening act to Joe at a club date, and they spoke backstage briefly, but at least they spoke very civilly, and Leon said something like, don't you remember that evening we got together in Hollywood and blah, 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 blah? And Joe was like, oh, I forgot about that. So I think that it planted in Joe's head like, oh my God, we could have been friends all these years. That's the feeling that I got. It really is a Tulsa story. This whole Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour, there was no Tulsa date set up when they started out on this tour. And I found some of the paperwork from back then. D. Anthony complaining, oh my God, the Tulsa date cost so much because we had to fly in unexpectedly to Tulsa. But Leon insisted they play his hometown. So they did. And people today at the church studio were talking about, I was there when Mad Dogs and Englishmen came to Tulsa. So I'm so thrilled that all that's in this book and all that energy was captured on that album and in people's memories here in Tulsa. Everyone was so enthusiastic, first of all, to be in the studio and see where so much fabulous music has come out of Tulsa. And the empire, the musical empire that Leon Russell started. I had no idea of the character or the artistic community that exists here. I mean, it's just amazing. I live in Tucson, Arizona, and likewise, there are a lot of hidden gems in Tucson, and I'm finding that about Tulsa as well. I love the architecture. I love that a lot of people are coming in and redoing the buildings, like the church has been done, but a lot of art studios and galleries, and just some beautiful parks and musical spaces, the Bob Dylan Museum, the Woody Guthrie Museum. It's just amazing to see everything. Anyone that thinks that Tulsa is just a gasoline and oil town has a real surprise. It's a delight, a lot of energy. I will definitely be coming back here and recommending people to come here.